Hey guys, I'm going to be talking about learning disorders and difficulties in identifying them. I think it's first important to realize what learning disabilities actually are. They're an umbrella term for a wide variety of learning problems. So, a learning disability is not a problem with intelligence or motivation. Children with learning disabilities aren't lazy or dumb. In fact, most are just as smart as everyone else. Their brains are simply wired differently. This difference affects how they receive and process information. So simply put, children and adults with learning disabilities see, hear, and understand things differently. This can lead to trouble with learning new information and skills and putting those skills to use. The most common types of learning disabilities involve problems with reading, writing, math, reasoning, listening, and speaking. Now, there are problems with identifying these disorders, and one of the main problems is that they look very different from one child to another. So one child may struggle with reading and spelling, while another loves books but can't understand math. Still another child may have difficulty understanding what others are saying or communicating out loud. The problems are very different, but they are all learning disorders. In fact, in America, under federal law, under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, the term is specific learning disability, which is held under one of 13 categories of disability under that law. Now, learning disabilities should not be confused with learning problems, which are primarily the result of visual, hearing, or motor handicaps, of intellectual disability, of emotional disturbance, or of environmental, cultural, or economic disadvantages. Generally speaking, people with learning disabilities are of average or above average intelligence. There just often appears to be a gap between the individual's potential and actual achievement. This is why learning disabilities are often referred to as hidden disabilities. The person looks perfectly normal and seems to be a very bright and intelligent person, yet may be unable to demonstrate the skill level expected from someone of a similar age. Another problem with identifying a learning disorder is when gifted students are involved. This is because identifying students for gifted programs and for special education services for individuals with learning disabilities tend to be mutually exclusive activities. Often students with learning disabilities who are gifted fail to meet the eligibility requirements for either of the programs because the identification process fails to recognize and consider the special characteristics of this population. Now, Scruggs and Mostopieri identify 8 problems regarding identifying learning disorders. So they include over-identification, variability, specificity, conceptual considerations, discrepancy issues, early identification, and local implementation. They argue that the increasing rate of identification of learning disorders can be attributed to the lack of a clear definition or identification process, and a process that relies on excluding other possibilities to make a decision. An example given is if mental retardation, emotional disturbance, or cultural disadvantages are ruled out, often learning disability is then the identified condition. Now, the struggle in identifying a child with a learning disorder is the various symptoms and broad categories of classification, and making clearer criteria for identification could streamline and simplify this process. That is something that we hope to discuss further in this video.
Hey guys, so I'm going to talk today about something that can be quite controversial in schools, and this is the teacher misdiagnosis and labeling of students. So first of all, just to be clear, I'm not saying that all teachers do this or that it happens in every school, but it's just something that I have noticed recently and that I've seen. So in one of the articles that I used for information regarding this issue, concentrated primarily on special education in England. So the article talked about how there has recently been a drop in the percentage of special education students, and this kind of led to the investigation on why this was, which also led to the fact that about a fourth of children identified as having a special educational need were actually misdiagnosed. So when we talk about this fact, schools across England are doing one of two things. So they're either labeling students as SEN simply based on them not being able to achieve achieve their standards, right? So being able to achieve their grade level standard. Um, and then on the opposite end, what we have is schools that actually have students that are SEN, but they're not receiving that extra support because they either haven't been identified or diagnosed. So this then creates an issue as a lot of the extra support is then going to students who actually might not need it as much, right? The article also goes to state that teachers are over-diagnosing behavior and learning problems. So, simply put, teachers are labeling students as special needs students when they actually might not be special needs students. Something that I've learned in school and throughout my practicum is that every student learns differently. They learn at a different pace, they learn in a different manner. So if a student is falling behind, it doesn't necessarily mean that he or she has a learning disability or a special needs, right? I think in general, people kind of need to get away from the idea of diagnosing any student that has a small a small behavioral issue or difficulty concentrating in class, right? So for example, if you have, say you have Timmy and Timmy doesn't listen very well in class, he can't concentrate very well, it doesn't necessarily mean that he has ADHD, right? We shouldn't label him as having ADHD. Another example, you have Susie, and she's below grade level on reading. She's not a fluent reader. She can't comprehend everything super well, but that also doesn't mean that she's dyslexic. So I think in some cases, teachers are a little bit too quick to jump to conclusions and labeling students. Some of these behaviors are actually very normal and very natural for a child in any learning environment. The hard part is distinguishing when the child actually needs the extra help or if they do have the special need, right? And that's when the diagnosis process comes into place.